When I first looked at the readings for Ordinary Time for the day, I saw it wasn't the readings we had. I chose the readings from St. Justin the Martyr for the memorial. But the first reading was from Tobit. It was about Tobit blaming his wife for claiming that she stole a goat, and they were arguing back and forth. And I'm like, I'm a celibate priest. I'm not sure what I'd preach on that. And the gospel was, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. So I always thought I should preach a 30-minute talk on tithing and stewardship, so I'm glad you've all come tonight. Instead, I chose the readings from the memorial, but I kept the Antiphon from the Alleluia. And this is the Antiphon from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. May the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ enlighten the eyes of our hearts, that we may know what is our hope that belongs to our call. May the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ enlighten the eyes of our hearts, that we might know what is the hope that belongs to our call. So let's begin with enlighten the eyes of our hearts. One of the things I've learned over 20 years is to trust God in all the seasons of life. We all have the seasons of life, whether it's the blistering winters or the blooming spring. It's the scorching summers of our life, or even during the fall when the leaves go from green to yellow and red and orange to brown, reminding us that there is a sense of dying that ultimately is a preparation for the new life ultimately that's given to us in Jesus Christ. We've all had spiritually sunny days, and sometimes it's cloudy. Sometimes we're walking in the night, and sometimes we're walking by faith and not by sight. We've all had those experiences. Sometimes we ask, are you with us, Lord? Are you with us? Sometimes the Lord allows us to be pruned individually and as a society. And yet the pruning is all part of mysterious preparation that we only understand many times only in retrospect of what God does after one is pruned. He can bear great, great fruit through us. Enlighten the eyes of my heart. So really, he taught me, if I had to say, he taught me to trust in the 3 Ps. His presence, his promptings, and people he puts in our path. His presence, his promptings, and his people he puts in his path. Let's start with just his presence. As you know, I was a chaplain so I've been 20 years a priest, and 10 years was at Mount St. Mary's University. Great blessing to see of some of the students and those who have been part of it. What a great, great gift. Thank you. What a beautiful gift. And I remember that I was just thinking back, and it was, it's fast-paced on a university campus. It's fast-paced. Full days, full weekends, about 6.5 days you're kind of on from the morning. It's not early mornings, but it's late nights, right? Sometimes we'd have confessions at 11 o'clock at night. That was during Lent. We called it 11th hour confessions. Never too late for confession. 11th hour confessions. That was during Lent, and it's like, well, welcome to the life. And recently, my feast anniversary was last Wednesday, and I got a text from one of my former students, Caroline. And Caroline had reminded me, she's like, Father Brian, remember the song? It was one of the last homilies I got to give. The song had been going through my head. It was, some of you are familiar with the song, Come Thou Font. It's like, come thou font of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. And it was one of the living words the Lord gave me right before I left the mount. There was occasionally the Lord would give me these living words, and it was like, say that to the university. And the living words were it's not always comforting words, right? And I just felt really called to share with the mount. I was like, this should be our hymn. It has the mount in it. And I got to share with them. I says, if people graduate and become good teachers, that's okay. That's a good thing. If people become the best, like they own their own business and employ other people, those are great things. But if they come to Mount St. Mary's University and don't know the love of God and his calling for their life, we would have missed our mission. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. I was sharing with them the mission of a Catholic university, and especially at Mount St. Mary's. How can we not talk about the love and the calling of God for each person? Because in the end, that's what matters. And the Lord reminded me of his presence and giving me living words that sometimes he called me to speak. And that hymn, it was like the mount, this should be our hymn. This should be our hymn. Maybe all of our hymn. Our hymn for all of us. But I learned trust in his presence. The Lord give me living words along the way. Also trust in his promptings. So many of you know, my life has had like little promptings and little apostolates, we would call in my life, little inspirations the Lord has developed over the years. I'll just share with some of them as I look back on the 10 years. So I wasn't the only inspirer, but when we used to have those Men in Black basketball games, that was an inspiration from a number of our seminarians. Like, let's play basketball. We love basketball. Let's play against the parishes. And so a number of us said, yeah, let's do these Men in Black basketball games. So I wasn't ultimately the inspirer fully. I was among them. But we started doing it. It allowed kind of the creativity and little comedy of the gifts that I like to use. So some of you know Father Leo Patalinghug. Father Leo is a cooking priest. You sometimes see Grace Before Nails now plating Grace, right? He's doing that. We were stationed together. And then in the midst of that, he used to do these halftime shows of breaking boards and break dancing. So we would be playing basketball, and Father Leo would do these halftime shows, and it was like, maybe I could be like the pre-halftime show. And myself and another seminarian, like the first time we did Irish dancing. We don't know how to Irish dance. We were clerics in a kilt. And we had an amateur Irish dancer, and we were going out there, and it was like, they were like, Father Leo is running late, but they said there's someone else who wants to come on as the pre-show. And they're like, well, who is it? And then all of a sudden they heard the bagpipes. And we came out. And we did this crazy dance. It was ridiculous, but we had an amateur dancer who was doing a little bit more intricacy things. And we got to share things about faith, and it was silly and crazy, but it was beautiful. It made young people see like priests were just normal people who love to have a lot of fun. Second time, it was the Pope Benedict had been installed. So I learned this German knee slapping dance where you're like back and forth, and we choreographed a dance for that and talked about Pope Benedict. In honor of Pope Benedict, we learned a dance to show him. That was part of our second year's halftime show. And another halftime show, we did Priest versus Wild, right? Surviving in the wilderness in Australia. All we had was a spork and a water bottle. And we did this like ridiculous thing with blow-up alligators and stuffed snakes. It was ridiculous. And I would always run out of food, but the other priest, he always had like Domino's Pizza or a Burger King. And my big thing was, well, where'd you get that? And he's like, I found it. Where do you find it? Out in the wilderness. He always found things, and he had the comforts of this, but I always ran out of food and had nowhere to sleep. But it was one of those promptings. Brian, don't put your light under a bushel basket. Use the gifts and the things you love to do. In my spare time, like making up little comedic things, that's interesting to me. That's how my brain works. I like presenting things in creative ways. And how beautiful that was one of the promptings the Lord gave that developed over the years. The second prompting, some of you know. So when I tell you a quick backstory. When I was in seminary, in my first year we had roommates. And with my roommate, like I had a book, it's called The Saints Show Us Christ. And it was basically little stories about the saints, one a day. It was like this long, and sometimes it was like, it would kind of leave, like tune in tomorrow to learn the rest of the story. And it was like a cliffhanger. And I'll never forget, I was reading about this person I had never heard of. His name was Isaac Jogues. I've never heard of Isaac Jogues and Jean de Brebeuf. Who are these people? And they're talking about like their love of God and the things they endured. And, Jean de Brebeuf was tortured for like 17 hours. Brutal. Isaac Jogues, right, had his fingers chewed off ultimately. It was just like the hardships they went for the love of the gospel. And I still remember seminary. That's my first year in seminary, second year in seminary, that I remember saying to myself, like, how come I don't know that story? Because Isaac Jogues was martyred 6 hours away. And that was a seed that was planted, one of the early promptings. Some of you heard me the story talk about I went on this, it was our youth group, and the youth group was bringing people on a haunted hayride. Some of you heard this story, but it's a beautiful story. And I went, and there was like 25 of us, and I was on the last group to go through the haunted hayride. And when we went into the barn, the last group, it said, "Welcome to the haunted hayride. Please sign your soul over to the devil." And I'm like, "What? Welcome to the haunted hayride. Please sign your..." That was the permission slip form. You had to sign your soul over to the devil. And I'm like, no. I was like, absolutely not. I was livid. And I'm not usually a livid person. I was livid. And I was like, we have to do better. So when I was at St. John of Westminster, it was like, I don't know. Could we do something in the cemetery, respecting the cemetery, but teaching the faith in the cemetery where you meet people back from the dead telling their stories? And in my first 3 or 4 years, I started writing scripts, and some of you were part of that, where I would bounce off ideas like, well, how does this sound? If you were to meet Isaac Jogues, was the first script I wrote. What would it be like to meet the martyrs? And what would happen when a martyr dies? What's the next thing the martyr sees? This was the first line. I got it from a letter to Origen. It said this: "And all I remember at the end of my life was I closed my eyes to the things of this world," this is what the martyrs say, "and opened my eyes up to see the face of God." And they walk away into the cemetery. Who would have thought it would be stationed at a parish called St. Isaac Jogues many years later? Trust in the promptings the Lord has for us. And how beautiful. It kind of developed over time. The Seton Shrine does it. They get about 1,200 people to go through it every year. If you've never been out, I'm inviting you. A living encounter of faith in the cemetery at the Seton Shrine, where you meet people back from the dead talking about how we're called to live and how we're called to love and persevering through difficulties and hardships and loss of loved ones. My brothers and sisters, these trust in the promptings God has for us and see what God can do. So Men in Black, back from the dead, cemetery walk, which is ridiculous, but it definitely faith. And then about 11 years ago, I was working with a group of laity, and I really felt called to learn more about spiritual direction and training people as spiritual directors. I didn't know what that meant. I started doing research. I talked to a place out in Denver that was doing spiritual direction, Father Timothy Gallagher's group, if you know him as an author, and it was like, yeah, there was conversations, but nothing was happening. It was like a year and a half, and we had Cardinal O'Brien that became sent to Rome, and then no one was here, and then Archbishop Laurie, and so it was like delayed. I was at a conference with our college students out in Orlando, Florida, a focus conference. And while I was at the conference with 8,000 to 10,000 people, I kept running into these sisters. They were the apostles in the interior life. And they're like, "Hey, we keep running into you. Do you want to have lunch with us?" And I'm like, "Well, there's a lot. Okay, well, I'll have lunch with you." And we kept crossing paths. And while I was with her, they were like, "You should come to this Catholic spiritual mentorship program in Kansas City." And I'm like, "No, Kansas City's nowhere near here." I was like, in the Northeast, we go north-south. There's 7 states within 3 or 4 hours. And I've seen movies about Kansas. And it didn't end well. And I don't have red slippers. "No, you should consider coming. They're Italian sisters. You should consider coming." "No. When is it?" "It's the middle of May." "I'm booked. I have college students. We're going on a pilgrimage." "That's impossible." Well, that was January. And in March and April, several of my college students backed out of the pilgrimage. And in April and getting close to May, more backed out. "Oh, we have this." Well, this came up. We were down to 3 people. And I'm like, I don't think I'm doing this long pilgrimage with 3 people. And suddenly, the impossible was an open schedule for those days. For the last 9 years, I've been going out to Kansas City for this Catholic spiritual mentorship program. And the whole mystery of it's fed my preaching, it's fed my thoughts, fed encounters with other people and growing in faith and helping others grow in faith. And it's been a rich part of my life. Trust in the promptings of God, even if it takes a long time to unfold. Because I'm slow and I miss them all the times. But God likes to repeat himself. Trust in the promptings and even trust in the people God puts in your path. I love that image. We were made for this place and this time. Pay attention to those who are around us. Pay attention to those who God puts in our path. And see what God has to say. And see the different gifts that we all bring. That's the gift of being a priest. We go to each place and each parish and just say, okay, we're all in this together. And God wants us to share the gospel and the love of Jesus Christ with many, many people, especially with those around us. How does God want to use you and me? And let's pay attention for this place and this time. Trust in his presence, trust in his promptings, and trust in the people he sends to us and encounters. Let's have our eyes wide open. Enlighten the eyes of our heart, Lord, that we might trust in those three P's, presence, promptings, and people. What is the hope that belongs to our call? I did share with you, it's a little bit of a different kind of homily. It's like a little sharing of the heart, a little behind the scenes of myself. So the last 9 years, I've really developed a friendship for John the Baptist. I love John the Baptist. We're friends. We talk. And I don't know what it is about John the Baptist. I'm nothing like John the Baptist. I'm not as prayerful. I'm definitely not as penitential. He ate grasshoppers, and I'm not going to eat any cicadas. I promise you that. But I love John the Baptist. And the Lord showed me how, if there's things we have in common, some of it's the charisms, right? Everyone has different charisms. One of the charisms is evangelism, right? Teaching the faith, sharing the faith, finding ways to announce the gospel and even to proclaim it. I felt in the last 2 years a call more and more to, it's a different kind of preaching. Proclaim the faith to the world, to those in front of you. Share the message of the gospel. Share them why it matters. Lift them up. Something I feel like I share with John, the call of John the Baptist. I share with you, the Lord give me, I think it's wisdom, right? Living words. There's time the Lord gives me very living words. Sometimes when I'm meeting with someone, he'll give me a living word for someone. And the way I know it's a living word is it resonates in a very surprising and deeper way. And it's like it just comes out. It's not all the time. But it's part of these living words the Lord gives. Occasionally, each one of us has our own charisms. Other charism is prophecy, right? Not prophecy like predicting the future, but being able to announce and speaking the truth in love. It's not always easy to live the gospel. It'd be easy to kind of teach an easy message, right? A comfortable message, but that's not the gospel. Why do I love John the Baptist? Because he was the best man of the bridegroom. He was the best man of the bridegroom. That sense, as much as I'm a priest and I'm preaching all the time and things like that, I'd rather be in the background. I'd rather be like John the Baptist pointing to him. See, him. Hopefully my homilies do that. Him, not me, him. John the Baptist, I must decrease. Christ must increase. I'd rather be the best man. I'd rather tell you stories about him and not me. Although God can work in me and through stories, right? We learn that. We all have those experiences. I don't need attention, nor do I want applause. I don't need attention, I don't want applause. Hopefully as Catholics and Christians, we have that reality, right? That sense of while some people might appreciate or celebrate, it will not be the way of Christ. If his way, we heard in the first reading, is the way of the cross, we need to know that we don't always will be celebrated. In fact, Jesus Christ himself said, if they have hated me, they will hate you too, at least in some level. Doesn't mean they're going to throw stones at us all the time. But this reality that we Christians are called to live differently. In the world, but not of the world. There's a famous early writing in the church, in the early church, it's called the letter to Dionysius. It's a very beautiful and famous letter, and there's a whole snapshot. I'd just like to read you a couple quotes from it. It says, Christians are indistinguishable from any other people by nationality or language or customs. It's like they're similar, but they live differently. They live in the flesh, but they're not governed by the desires of the flesh. They pass their days upon earth, but they are citizens of heaven. Christians love all men. Men persecute them. Condemned because they are not understood. They are put to death, but raised to life again. They live in poverty, but enrich many. They are totally destitute, but possess an abundance of everything. They suffer dishonor, but that is their glory. They are defamed but vindicated. And listen to what it says. It says, Christians are in the world like the soul is to the body. The body hates the soul and wars against it, not because of any injury the soul does to it, but because of the restriction the soul places on its pleasures. Similarly, the world hates Christians not because they've done anything wrong, but because they are opposed to its illicit enjoyments. Does that make sense? Isn't that a beautiful image? As the soul is to the body, so Christians are to the world. We're called to be lights to the world, we heard in the gospel. And we won't always be celebrating the things that the world celebrates. And so we live differently. We live in the world and not of the world. We need to be uncomfortably comfortable with that. Are you? Uncomfortably comfortable with being a little out of place. We're always going to be a little out of place. But in Christ, we're called to be salt to the earth and light to the world. Salt preserves it, right? We could just go along with the world and celebrate everything they're celebrating, but we won't be salt. We just lose our flavor. We just be the world. And sometimes the world runs over cliffs. Sometimes the world celebrates things because they think they're going to find happiness in things that will never, ever bring happiness. Because the things of this world, the pleasures of this world, and especially abuse of the pleasures, will never find peace, never find happiness that Jesus Christ can begin. It's only in the mystery of Jesus Christ that we can come to know who we are and whose we are. And it's only in that where we'll find where our happiness seeks. And that reality that we're called to live differently, to be a witness for life. Whether it's the unborn or those with special needs, we're always called to be a witness to life. Pope Francis regularly talks about the throwaway culture with the elderly, right? It's just a burden. It requires real sacrifice. That's hard. It'd be easy to do it another way. That's not our call, because that's not what love does. Love is willing to sacrifice for another. We're not called to be part of the throwaway culture. We're called to live differently. We still profess the sanctity of marriage, the complementarity of the sexes, biological realities that don't change. And yet we have compassion for those who struggle with gender or identity or sexuality. We're going to go to the 1,000th degree and the 1,000th road to walk with them. But we're not going to say something that's not true. And yet we love. We first love. It's compassion and truth. Like Christ, we're going to meet every person wherever they are. We're called to see the light of God even in the seeming darkness of the souls, whether it's in prisons or great sinners. Even those called to love our enemies and do good to those who hurt us, we're called to live differently. We're called to not walk over or walk past the refugee or the poor or the homeless. You know, St. Isaac Jogues has always had a beautiful presence of care for the poor, whether it's specifically in our local needs through our St. Vincent de Paul Society or through our sister parish in Haiti, St. Anthony of Chernow. There's a great love of we're called to have concrete care for the local poor and establish relationship internationally. How beautiful that commitment it is. Because that's what it means to live the gospel. How beautiful it is that we're not called to live the wide road or follow the wide road that everybody walks on. It is the narrow road that also includes conversion. And if we preach a message of the gospel without the call of conversion, we're missing half and one of the most important part of the messages. I think the reason why I feel very strongly, and sometimes I'll preach encouraging, but also a little bit challenging at times, is because it was the greatest gift that other people gave me, to speak the truth in charity. That the following Christ means to let go of some things and start new in Him whose mercy endures forever. My brothers and sisters, we have a living gospel. It's not an easy gospel. We can't preach a half gospel. It's the fullness of the faith. And so I want to be like John the Baptist, the best man that points to another, that speaks in compassion but also truth. I want to be like John the Baptist. I want to point, and hopefully all of us can point the way. But you know what other John that I love? John the beloved disciple. When I was getting confirmation, it was the 80s. I slipped in 2 confirmation names. My confirmation name is John Francis, after John the beloved disciple and Francis of Assisi. I grew up near the shrine of St. Anthony in Ellicott City. But John the beloved disciple, I think it's only more recently I've come to grow in my love for not just John the Baptist, but John the beloved disciple, the one who is close to the heart of Christ. What does that mean to be close to the heart of Christ? It means be willing to rest on the breast of Christ. What does that mean, and what does that look like? It means resting on the heart of Christ so we can have the heartbeat, right? The Scriptures give us that. We hear the words and the actions of Jesus, and we reflect and ponder them like Mary did. We rest ourselves on the breast of Christ that more and more His heartbeat will be our heartbeat. Who was the mother? There were some mothers that taught me this, right? When a little child is crying, and their heart's like pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter, but if you put their pitter-patter, sped-up heart on your slower heart, their hearts more and more go in sync. Isn't that the case with having a love for the Scriptures? A daily reflecting on the heart of Jesus Christ. So we can be like the beloved disciple, resting on his heart. Now, it's not always praying with Scripture, right, when we rest on the heart of Christ. Sometimes it's just laying our burdens or frustrations or sadness or sorrows. Sometimes the most beautiful prayers are the sighs we give the Lord, resting on his heart. My brothers and sisters, that's what it means to have the heart of Christ, the heart of the beloved disciple. May we have more and more that we might know how beautiful it is, the reason for our hope, which is Jesus Christ, and to have his heart and our heart. By the way, June is the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It's a very Eucharistic image. His heart and our hearts and his heart, are so one that it's indistinguishable, that people will recognize us as Christ, as the little prayer that we sometimes pray after Holy Communion. Lord, help me to see with your eyes and hear with your ears. Help me to speak with your words. Lift up with your hands. It's all about communion with the Lord. Help us to walk with your feet and love with your heart. That is the point of life. How could we live without the Eucharist? How beautiful it is to have hearts like John the Baptist. I want to be like the best man. In the heart of John, the beloved disciple, I want to rest frequently on the heart of Christ. You see, enlighten the eyes of our hearts, Lord. Lord, teach us to trust in those 3 Ps. Trust in your presence. Trust in your promptings. Trust in the people God puts in our life. That we may know what is our hope. It's Jesus Christ, whom John the Baptist points to, and John the beloved disciple rests on. And finally, what is the hope of our call? You know, it's coming up on a little less than 3 years at Isaac Jogues, but it's also COVID years, right? We had about 15 months of being a little bit more away or with masks and a little bit more distance. So it's not that same level of a full, quote-unquote, 3 years. There's some beautiful encounters during those 3 years, and it's just the beginning. The sense of us walking on a journey together, all of us on a journey together. And I'm reminded of just like thinking back over the 20 years, and I think my parents are watching. My mom got injured, or her foot got injured, so please pray for her recovery. She's doing a little bit better. But my mom and dad wanted to be here, but they were unable to be here. But I know they're watching, and I love you, Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad are right. That's where you learn about faith, that God matters, the Sunday Mass matters. That's where you learn from it. So thank you for your witness of faith for your children and your grandchildren. That's where I learned it, I think, and I love my mom and dad. I love my siblings. Good siblings, especially my sisters who were great witnesses of faith, Laurie and Suzanne. Beautiful, great witnesses of faith that really have walked with me and were big influences of why I kind of got reignited in faith after college. Right? How beautiful it was, the examples of my sisters in faith. I think of Thanksgiving for the many people. I'm thinking of my brother priests. You know, I didn't make a big invite to priests because it was kind of COVID. And we didn't know how big a celebration could happen until about 2 weeks ago. So I was like, well, this is going to be laid back. The 25th, I'll make a bigger one. I'll make a bigger deal, the next level deal about how beautiful it is. But I thank God for the gift of friendship. God bless Father Ed Meeks. I thank God for all my Iusa Caritas brothers. And priests, the Lord has blessed me with good priest friends, brothers. We always say we're in it for the marathon, not the sprint. I'm blessed with some great priest friends. We encourage one another. We walk with each other. There's something very beautiful about priests. We started gathering. Some of you know I went to the hospital to check on some things, right? And it was funny because we started having a monthly gathering of priests, once a month here for prayer and a dinner. And when I went to the hospital, that happened to be the day all the priests were gathering. So some people were in the chapel who were like, why are all these priests gathering? Father Brian must be dying or something. And we had like 8 to 10 priests gathering, but the Lord has shown me the importance and the gift of fraternity, priestly fraternity, encouraging one along the way. I am blessed, and we are blessed, with some wonderful, wonderful seminarians. Seminarian Kevin, who's been with me over the last year, what a great gift. What a great gift. It's been a blessing, a blessing. Seminarian Daniel, who's new, how beautiful it is, and what a spark plug of joy. He comes from St. Joe Fullerton. My good brother Samson. What a gift. What a gift. The fact is how beautiful it is. He he like is a different person since pastoral year. He has grown up. They've given him a lot of responsibilities and been preaching and speaking, and wow, I am very blessed. We are blessed, and he's going to be coming back in August for a few weeks before he starts back in seminary. So the blessings of the different seminarians that have come, Zach and David Ray, Dennis Walker, and others who have kind of sprinkled in and will come in the future. What a great gift. And I feel like that this is, I think Father Stephen especially sends them here. Why? Because of the bear hug that all of you give them. It's like, here's a plant, and we're going to water it and put sunlight and feed it and do all these great, I mean, it's incredible. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So it's a blessing for that. I think of the different many people. It's like when I see individual people, it like opens the door to a mansion of memories. Of memories, sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're more intense, sometimes they're happy moments, sometimes they're difficult moments, sometimes it was sad moments. But that is when you see each person here, each in our own way, the encounters, how he's been able to brought us together. It is so encouraging and inspiring. You inspire me. The people around me, I mean, it's easy to be a priest around people who are like, we just want to love the Lord again. We not do it perfectly. None of us do it perfectly. But we're striving, and we're all on this journey together. How beautiful. How beautiful. I'm blessed with a wonderful St. Isaac Jogues staff. A wonderful staff. Especially during these last, 14 months of it's been a journey, right? All using our own gifts, each in our own way, and how each person individually, what a great, great joy and blessing for each of the staff, what a blessing, and those involved in ministries. In ministries, both now, prior to COVID, right? Things are going to be opening up a little bit more for gathering. I'm thankful for all those who pray for me. Intercessors. That matters. Priests, we need prayers. And I think I've come in the last 3 years to appreciate and see that the prayers of others, it directly affects, like when I'm meeting with people. Like I feel the difference. I see the difference. Sometimes in tough circumstances, you can almost like feel like, it's like when Moses, they were lifting up his hand during a battle. It's like they're holding my hands up. They're holding my heart up. To be able to speak the love and the words of Jesus Christ, or what needs to be said in particular instances. I see it and I'm experiencing the goodness of the Lord. And how beautiful it is, the whole mystery of just everyone in between. I mean, my first 4 years, I was at St. John of Westminster. Great years, and I'm reminded of also of those who have died. All along the journey of those past 20 years, we all have loved ones who have died. Special way, Monsignor Art Valenzano, who I said, when I be a priest, I want to be like him when I grow up. Just a goodness, gentleness, a joyful, how beautiful. Him and many other. This vestment, as you know, is my friend Father Darren Didier, who died 3 months after being a priest. He was 6'5", so I'm one of the few priests that's tall enough to wear his vestment. I'm reminded of my spiritual directors like Father Vincent McMurray. I'm reminded of Father Zilla, who used to say, my name is Father Zilla, as in Godzilla. He was delightful. He had a great sense of humor, but he was a very beautiful spiritual. And I remember just those who have passed through our lives, right? The spiritual friendship, the encounters with others. That you and I counter Christ sometimes with one another, but always with one another in the broader sense of that. How beautiful it is. So I leave you with this. This is my 20th anniversary. I was always humbled because you had Father Lou was like 45 years, and I'm like, I'm nowhere near 45 years. I don't know how many priesthood celebrations I'm going to have. I don't know. We don't know. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, none of us. Whether it's 1 year or a day, 10 years or 20 years, whatever it may be, Lord, enlighten the eyes of our hearts. Trust in His presence. Trust in His promptings. Trust in the people that God puts in His path. That we may know what is our hope. That we have the hearts and the love of John the Baptist that keeps pointing to Christ, not to ourselves. And the heart of John the Beloved that rests on the breast of Christ. And we know the hope of our call, each of our call every day, right here, right now, with all of us, however long or short we have. And we know that this is just a glimpse. Whether we have a long or short life, it's nothing compared to eternity. And with God's help and God's grace, that's the road we're on. I like that image of heaven as a family reunion. Family reunion. And I have to think there's going to be plenty of story times of sharing the memories, the joyful mysteries of our life. the sorrowful mysteries of our life with God's grace, the luminous and the glorious mysteries that we have to ponder. That's why I started with the song, Be Thou My Vision. I love that image, Lord. Be Thou my vision. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure, my art. The Chosen had a beautiful thing that said, John the Baptist looked at Jesus and says, my heart is yours, my life is yours. And I repeat that today. Lord, my heart is yours, and my life is yours. Each of our lives and our hearts be the Lord's. High King of heaven, my victory won, may I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever before, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Still be my vision,